Gentlemen, there are two instructions that, quite frankly, I forgot to read them, so I'm going to read them to you now. In deciding this case, you must not consider or speculate about whether either party has insurance. Plaintiff Justin Malangoni has sued Craig Jackson, the defendant. Justin Malangoni claims that on July 20th, approximately 4 p.m., defendant Craig Jackson came to the residence of plaintiff Justin Malangoni and entered his residence, and once therein committed assault and battery upon plaintiff Justin Malangoni. Plaintiff contends that defendant pushed plaintiff to the ground, causing him to strike his head, and attempted to choke the plaintiff as he was exiting the bathroom of his residence. Plaintiff contends that as a result of defendant's conduct, the plaintiff suffered injuries, incurred medical expenses for care and treatment, suffered loss of wages, and emotional distress. Plaintiff contends that plaintiff is entitled to compensatory damages, punitive damages, and attorney's fees. Justin Malangoni must prove his claim by a greater weight of the evidence. Craig Jackson denies Justin Malangoni's claims. Craig Jackson is not required to disprove Justin Malangoni's claims. Craig Jackson has claimed certain defenses. Craig Jackson must prove his defenses of plaintiff's fault and self-defense by a greater weight of the evidence. Justin Malangoni also claims he is entitled to award of punitive damages because he claims that Craig Jackson committed an assault and or battery and intentional act. Justin Malangoni must prove his claim by clear and convincing evidence. All right, that's it. You may begin your opening argument, Mr. Wilson.
Your Honor, may I speak to the jury from in front of the...
Sure.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you again for being here. It may not seem like the American jurisdiction is a good check as kids who were close now and don't have any support your exact. But it's also an example of bringing your disputes to the community because we don't take them out like Western justice. It plays well on TV. It does not play well in society. People get hurt and people get killed. And that's why we have rules that say don't do. Now, the evidence in this case is just that. Now that doesn't go. The file statement. Justin Malangoni was dating Sylvia Smith, Craig Jackson's daughter. They started dating in April or February of 2009, and they dated for about a year. Now, during that time, they bought a house together. They weren't married, but they bought a house together. Now, the relationship ended, but now they have this house together. So they tried to work it out by agreement so that they would both stay in the house. That didn't work out so well. And on July 18th, 2010, an incident occurred. What happened that day, according to Mr. Malangoni, is that he got home from work and he went to his room. And no evidence at one point, he actually put a lock on his own door to his bedroom. And he went to sleep that day. Now during that time, Sylvia came into the room 6 or 7 times. At one point she was on a cell phone talking. Another point she was shaking some equipment. And on the last time she came into the room, it was clear from the evidence that what she was trying to do was antagonize Mr. Malangoni. And on the last incident, she was at the bed and was standing over him. And when he got in bed, he was freaked out. He woke up and there she was, standing over him. He was trying to get some sleep. So at that point, he got out of his bed, and he pushed her out of his room, shut his door. Sometime later, there was a discussion on the telephone. Mr. Jackson was on the phone and overheard some words that were said. Now, this was on July 18th. 2 days later, on July 20th, Mr. Jackson got on a flight from Los Angeles and flew out to Indiana. Now, the evidence, at the end of the day, will be that Mr. Jackson wanted to come here and show this man who was lost. He was going to take care of this incident by addressing and confronting Mr. Malcolm. Now, you heard the jury instructions where there was talk about in considering the witness's testimony, you should consider their interest, bias, or prejudice in testimony. Justin Malandoni has an interest and bias in this case. He's the plaintiff. Mr. Jackson has an interest in this case. He is the defendant and stands to lose in this case if the verdict is rendered. Sylvia Smith has both interest and bias and prejudice to the extent that she's going to testify in favor of her father. These are things you consider. And she's going to testify against her ex-boyfriend. These are all valid considerations for all of them. But the one witness in this case that had no interest, no bias, is Sean Buck. Officer Buck, who's now Detective Buck with the Maryville Police Department, is going to hear his testimony about it. And he's going to testify, and the evidence will show that Mr. Jackson admitted to him that he had come out from Los Angeles not to talk with Mr. Malcolm, but to confront Mr. Malcolm. Mr. Jackson told the officer that he told Justin when he got to the house, you want to put your hands on a man. That's not just talking to you, ladies and gentlemen. He's looking for a fight. The evidence will show that. And that a fight then ensued. Mr. Jackson admitted to pushing Mr. Malandoni. The evidence is that he was pushed to the ground and he hit his head. You'll see a photograph of what was his head. It's not permanently injured, but it's not some substantial physical injury. He also then attempted to choke him. And that evidence will come from Sean Buck, because Mr. Jackson told Officer Buck that he tried to choke him. Now, he didn't let go until Mr. Malandoni, in his own home, said, I can't breathe. And you'll see photographs and marks on his neck for being choked. The incident is no more complex than that. Now, you're going to be presented evidence about a defense of sudden or self-defense. And one of the elements you'll hear in that is that a person is entitled to self-defense, that defense, if a person is in imminent danger or another person is in imminent danger, such that if I were to charge Mr. Malandoni and I'm going to attack him that fast, he can defend me to prevent the assault. And juror number 18 could jump in and stop me from doing it. That's a valid defense. Because it's designed to prevent an imminent attack. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no evidence in this case of an imminent attack. The argument that they were in 2 days earlier was over. And in fact, when you hear Sylvia Smith, what wins? Because she gave a note to Mr. Malandoni that said, I have a guest coming at 3 o'clock. I can't say who it was. Could you please make sure the dogs are out of the house? There was no imminent threat to Ms. Smith. This was, plain and simple, Mr. Jackson's attempt to show Mr. Malandoni that he shouldn't have pushed her out of that bedroom. I'm a father of 3. If my daughters are in imminent harm, I tell them, get out of the house. We'll figure it out later. What I don't do is get on a plane, fly to Fort Irwin, and pick a fight with my son-in-law. There are ways to do things and ways not to do things. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not the Wild West, and this ain't television. The law says you cannot assault someone, and if you do, you're liable for damage. And that's what we're here to ask for. You'll hear evidence from Mr. Malandoni, and we're going to put the bills in that he had about $1,367 in that. nothing too spectacular. You've also had to pay for attorney fees, and they wouldn't ask for an order to intervene. Only find that if you find the evidence shows that we have met our burden. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the testimony of Officer Buck alone will demonstrate that we have met our burden through the admissions of Mr. Jackson. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Your Honor. Counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Several of the facts in this case are not in dispute. For example, the fact that there was a physical confrontation on July 20th of 2010, this was a while ago, between Justin Malingoni and Greg Jackson. I think our preview of the evidence is going to include a few things Mr. Wilson would like to mention. It is true that Sylvia Smith and Mr. Malingoni began dating. Ill-advised as it may have been, they bought a house together before they were married, or before the relationship had been going on long enough, the relationship deteriorated, so they became strangers to themselves in their own home. What Mr. Wilson didn't tell you are some of the other facts that we anticipate are going to come in for your consideration in this case. Is that Mr. Malingoni became not only verbally, but physically abusive. How do we know this? Because you will hear from Sylvia Smith. You will hear from Craig Jackson. And you're going to hear from Mr. Malingoni himself. Admit this. Mr. Malingoni, on the days before Mr. Jackson came from Los Angeles, to speak with and confront Mr. Malingoni, was on the phone with Sylvia. And you heard screaming in the background. It turns out it was Justin Malingoni. And I believe, as Mr. Wilson said, he overheard some things Mr. Malingoni said. He overheard Justin Malingoni screaming verbal abuse at Sylvia Smith, calling her a bitch, calling her a whore. So what does this do? Craig Jackson becomes a little concerned. Sweetie, what is going on? Oh, that's Justin. He is on the cell phone with you. Sylvia is on her cell phone. Craig is on his cell phone. He doesn't hang up with Sylvia. He picks up his landline, Mr. Jackson does, and dials the landline to the house, where Mr. Malingoni answers. He says, what is going on here? Now, this is no way to talk to my daughter, let alone anyone else. Mr. Jackson lets Mr. Malingoni talk to him himself. He says, tell you what, you tell me your side, then you listen to me. Mr. Malingoni goes on, explains to his side of the story to Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Jackson says, okay, now it's your turn to listen to me. Mr. Malingoni, there's no more interest in the phone. That wasn't enough to get Mr. Jackson out of from Los Angeles. What was enough is shortly thereafter, when he gets a call from his daughter saying, now he's put his hands on me and pushing me down. This has gone far enough. Mr. Malingoni already hung up the phone on Mr. Jackson. You know he's not going to engage in a conversation over the phone. He's just going to hang up the phone. And Mr. Jackson is 1,500 to 2,000 miles away. He says, I'm going to come out there and get this straightened out. What's it like? Doesn't drive all night in some kind of murderous or mental range. What's it like to get out there? Mr. Malingoni, he arrives, Mr. Malingoni is in his room. Mr. Jackson, while admittedly upset with Mr. Malingoni, is knocking on the door of Mr. Malingoni. He knocks hard on the door of Mr. Malingoni, saying some things through the door, which you will hear from Mr. Jackson and Mr. Malingoni. I would ask you to pay careful attention to what the topic of the words in that discussion is. Then there's nothing. He's not coming out of the room. Mr. Jackson doesn't enter the bedroom because after comes out of the room, excuse me, my jacket, with his elbow raised, and he's charging. I found it kind of ironic that Mr. Wilson just got done talking. That if someone's coming at you, you have an absolute right to defend yourself, because he's correct. You do. That's how the physical confrontation began. And at that moment, the evidence is going to show that Craig Jackson, for want of any conversation that was had, for the want of any email, for the want of any message, at that moment, he can stop, he can repel Justin's attack. Well, Mr. Jackson gets the better of Mr. Malagoni. This is a fairly brief altercation. We'll describe to you the layout of the house. They get in, Mr. Malagoni exits out of the bedroom, there's a physical confrontation, and they end up down the hallway, where Mr. Malagoni strikes his head on a weight plate that's in like a small room at the end of the hall, when they both fall together. And as soon as Mr. Malagoni, in the wrestling match that is there, says something like, "I can't breathe," or "I'm having trouble breathing," Mr. Jackson lets him go. Mr. Malagoni stands up and flees the house. That's the entire incident. You will obviously hear details from Mr. Malagoni, from Sylvia Smith, and from Craig Jackson, hopefully to your satisfaction, on one side or the other. The video deposition of Detective Buck was taken just a handful of days ago, some 4.5, nearly 5 years after the incident. Detective Buck admits he does not have much of a recollection. He's just reviewing a report, a summary report that he had prepared some almost 5 years ago. And despite all of the details that were told to him by Mr. Malagoni and by Mr. Jackson, there's not a whole lot of information in there. So Detective Buck just makes the conclusion that once Mr. Jackson admitted he was in a physical confrontation with him, that's all he needed to hear. Watch that deposition closely and listen to my questions closely in the manner in which he responds to them. At the end of the day, Mr. Jackson booked a flight out of concern when he could not have a phone conversation or any other kind of face-to-face communication with Mr. Malagoni for verbally and physically assaulting his daughter. So he did what a man does. You show up to at least confront him and say, "This can't happen. You guys are adults. You're an adult. Don't do this." Rather than have a conversation, which included some statements, again, pay close attention when you hear them, including some explicatives when Mr. Jackson on the other side of the door. The only way the physical confrontation happened here is when Justin Malagoni exited and initiated physical contact in the hall. Even after that, the testimony is going to be that after Mr. Jackson let him go, in case anyone was wondering whether or not this was his plan to just serve this kid his lunch that day, he let him go. Didn't go after him, didn't stop him, didn't chase him from the house, didn't try and re-engage in any physical conflict. It was done. Mr. Jackson repelled the attack. He won the fight. And I submit to you that at the close of the evidence, your conclusion is going to be that Justin Malagoni was embarrassed and ashamed about the treatment that he did to this woman, despite whatever legitimate arguments they were having. He took it too far. Then he initiates the physical confrontation and loses, so as a last act to save face, or to stick it to Sylvia and her father, files this lawsuit. Not only asking for damages he sustained as a result of his own actions when they fell down together and he hit his head, but now he wants punitive damages on top of it. At the close of the evidence, I am confident that you're going to find all of the inconsistencies, the several inconsistencies that Mr. Malagoni will tell you today, versus statements in his deposition, versus previous statements under oath, and statements to officer, that are all the same. At the end of the day, we're going to be asking you to return a verdict in favor of Mr. Jackson, that Mr. Malagoni not profit for his conduct on not only that day, but his conduct with Mr. Jackson's daughter in the days before. And that would conclude your charge. Thank you so much.
Call the first witness.
Your Honor, we will present the testimony of Officer Buck to get your apple button.
Okay.
It's next to the Elmo, Judge.
Right here. This one. This
Well,
one.
he hit seal. It's the middle, and then apple's right next to Elmo. Looks like a
Elmo's here.
next to it is the apple team.
Right.
There you go, Judge.
Okay.
Something new is
View it on the monitor there, ladies and gentlemen.
You're absolutely right, but it's, yeah. I recall this.
I do. You see the third name. It's Detective Sean Buck. And you said detective, you are a police officer? Yes, sir. You're an officer with Town American Never Police Department. And when did you become detective? Detective in March 1st of this year. How long have you been with the Marietta Police Department? No, police department since February of 2007. And before I knew you were. Before that, I was with Newton County and Brooklyn. Okay. And just like County Boroughs and one town west, east, correct. All right. How long have you been a police officer? For 10 years. Detective, we heard about an incident which occurred on July 20th of 2010. Do you recall responding to an incident at an address of 22 Black River, Marietta, Indiana? I recall responding to a call, but specific facts not right immediately. For how many calls do you respond to, give or take, in any given year? Between 1,500 and 2,000. And does that include calls of all kinds of accidents, domestics? Yes, sir. The what she's really with this, we're scheduled for trial this Monday after this weekend. Are you available locally Monday? Unfortunately not. I'll be out of town for a previously planned getaway. All right. I'm going to show you what's been marked as deposition exhibit 1. And just for purposes of identification, can you state what that is? It's a police report that we use in our police department for case report. And was that report completed by you? It was. Was that following the information that occurred from the case after? That's correct. We deliberately required information from that incident that occurred in 2010, so we're referring to the report with that recollection. I believe you said it was the facts in the report with that comment. Okay. How do you learn about the incident? When it was reported to us that a person from the station reported. And who was the person who reported the incident? Based on reference to the report, it would be Justin Manley. Okay. And do you respond to the residents? Yes. What time did you arrive at that residence, if I may? Yes, sir. The call was dispatched at 5:07 p.m. on July 20th, 2010, and I arrived at when you arrived, did you speak with somebody at that residence? Yes, Craig Jackson. And did Mr. Jackson report to you his version of what had occurred? Yes. What did he tell you? Again, reference in the report, Mr. Jackson stated that he was there to confront his daughter's ex-boyfriend, whom he identified as Justin Malgoni, regarding an incident that occurred on Sunday. He stated that his daughter, Sophie Smith, had told him that Justin put his hands on her. As a result, Mr. Jackson traveled from his home in Los Angeles to the residence in question to confront Malgoni. Jackson stated that he entered the house and confronted Malgoni. He said he wanted to try to put hands on the man, quote unquote. Jackson stated at that time he pushed Malgoni and choked him. Did he say whether or not Mr. Maloney struck him? He did not indicate it. Did he spoke? Did he tell you that he was put in a position of having to defend himself? I don't know if he truly articulated that, but based on what he told me he did to Justin Maloney, logical under self-belief, that he would have to defend himself. Oh. Well, you say he didn't after the initial push? Correct. Okay. And Mr. Mr. Jackson told you that he chose Mr. Maloney. Yes, it was. Did you speak with Mr. Maloney regarding this? Yes. And when you spoke with him, did you have a chance to observe him any bruising or any kind of indication of injury of some kind? Yes. Again, based on referencing the report of another officer speaking to him while I was at the residence, speaking to Mr. Jackson, I then spoke with Mr. Maloney, and it turned out he did have injuries from these. Did he tell you what happened to him? He stated that Mr. Jackson came to the residence and assaulted him, causing injuries to his face, his neck, and he was treated by medics on the scene. Did you have a chance to look at his head? Yes. Did you tell the jury any signs of injury that you observed? Again, he complained of head and neck pain, and his forehead was bleeding. He had a cut on his forehead. Okay. He also had discoloration, swelling, and minor abrasions in the front and back. All right. And if you could, when you say the front and back, did you have experience with choke victims? Yes. How many times have you investigated any incidents involving choke victims? You can answer.
Stop it, please.
I'm sorry, Judge, I'll withdraw that objection.
Okay. Good to see you again.
Oh, Jimmy, come back.
Is it coming?
Did Mr. Jackson indicate to you that Justin told him after the while he was being choked he couldn't breathe? Again, yes. Yes, Mr. Maloney related to me that he told Mr. Jackson he couldn't breathe, to which he said Jackson then responded to him, quote, I don't care. At some point, did you leave the residence? After speaking to Jackson? At some point when you were working on the residence, did you leave? Oh, yes. And did you take Mr. Jackson with you? Yes. Any further questions? Thank you.
Good morning, Detective. I just have a few questions of my own. In your experience as a police officer and now as a detective, you take several reports. I have the occasion to make several reports over the course of your career, correct? Yes. I would imagine that as many calls as you would respond to in a given hour, many of them, if not all, would result in some sort of written record or report. No purpose. Okay. Detective, let me ask you what I would assume would be some obvious questions. When you were making your report and speaking with alleged victims and witnesses, etc., and so on, is it important to be as accurate as you can be in your reports?
Yes, that's actually why I write my reports the day that I take information from the case, so it's stipulated section.
You anticipated one of my questions. This report was actually made in the years. Okay. And is there a way that you remember, or is that just a custom practice, or is there any indication on the report itself that reminds you of that?
That's my personal practice. We are allowed to hold out reports if we choose. However, I feel, especially any illness involving a criminal nature, I want to have on paper that day.
Okay. When Mr. Wilson was asking you some questions, your first contact with Justin Maloney was him arriving at the Maryland Police Department, correct? We were informed that you were on TI. Okay. at the police department when you arrived, or when you were on duty?
I do not recall. We were all on duty. I believe what happened was one officer went to the police department to the lobby to speak with Mr. Malagoni, whoever was the closest officer. Whoever was closest to the residents responded to the residents. That was my belief that I was probably closer to the residents.
You did not have an occasion to speak with Mr. Malagoni when he first arrived at the Maryville police station.
I don't believe I was.
Okay. Did you learn through the course of your investigation, reviewing this file or the other means, how Mr. Malagoni arrived at the Maryville police station?
I believe he arrived at the police.
Okay. Did you understand that he was there walking under his own power?
I believe so.
Okay. Does your file or records or reports indicate whether or not Mr. Malagoni was reviewed for injuries by the officers on duty before you had a chance to speak with him?
By the first officer spoke?
Yes.
I would believe so, yes.
Is there a document or a report that would indicate that? You will review the file or your records?
Yes, I may record.
Yes, okay.
It appears to be spoken to most likely initially by Officer Van Goven, who took photographs.
Okay. Do you know if those photographs were taken before or after you had an occasion to speak with Mr. Malagoni?
I would not know.
Going back to the narrow summary of information that you prepared for your report, when you responded to the scene and first encountered Mr. Jackson, where was he in or on the premises? What was his location?
Please, I say, well, yeah, that's fine. If you need to record it, or just not able to record it, report it for the record, and go ahead. According to this, I don't believe he was at the residence when I spoke with him, but where specifically, I don't believe so. He might have come out and met me directly.
If a witness or a party recalls that Mr. Jackson would have been in the driveway when you arrived, do you have any information to dispute that on your report?
I don't believe so.
At any point during or after the point you spoke with Mr. Jackson, or or before, did you enter the residence in order to view the scene where Mr. Malagoni alleged that this attack had occurred, like in the house?
I'm sure that's what.
Does your report indicate that?
I don't know if the references it, and I wouldn't reference it if there wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
At any point, in my the narrative summary, it's my understanding, and Detective, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Malagoni told you that he was ambushed exiting his bathroom. Correct?
That sounds correct.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to read this line from the exhibit in front of you. Malagoni stated that Jackson ambushed him as he was exiting the bathroom in his residence. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have an occasion did Mr. Malagoni or Mr. Jackson relate to you how the confrontation began? Did you ask questions about the actual ambush?
Absolutely.
Okay. How did it happen according to their statements?
Mr. Malagoni,
Yes.
He indicated to me that Mr. Jackson ambushed him coming out of the restroom and threw him on the ground and choked him.
Okay. Had Mr. Malagoni told you that Mr. Jackson or other people were banging on the door, whether it was the bathroom door or a different door, and making threats to him, that would be in your report, wouldn't it?
If he related
To you. Okay. Now, obviously, Detective, you were not there to witness the actual fight. Okay. You were relying on the statements provided in large part by Mr. Malagoni, and that and then your assumption would be that Mr. Malingoni would be truthful when he spoke to you, correct?
Well, in my experience, I don't rely on just one person's statement because, unfortunately, there is mutual battery statement again. When I spoke with both of the people involved, the first one I spoke with was Mr. Jackson, who indicated that he initiated the assault.
You say initiated the assault, but did Mr. Malingoni came at him, and that's when he grabbed and pushed? That's when he grabbed and pushed Mr. Malingoni and acted in his defense?
No.
Did he not tell you that, or was that just not indicated in the report?
No, he would have told me that. This is his version of the events as they occurred, which is related in the first paragraph that ends with I then transport Jackson to Maryland Police Department pending further investigation. Anything that he stipulates the facts that occurred at the scene in his mind, I'm going to put there because at this point I don't know if it's a mutual battery case. I haven't seen the other person involved. I'm going strictly based on the information given to me by who turned out to be the alleged suspect.
So we have, on your report, your first paragraph concerns your conversation with Mr. Jackson. And other than him identifying himself, there are 4 statements made in that paragraph, correct? About how he came from Los Angeles to confront Justin Malingoni about the treatment of his daughter. That the residence is owned by both his daughter and Mr. Malingoni. That he made the statement that you would try putting your hands on a man, and then he describes you had the statement there about pushing and choking Mr. Malingoni, correct? Yes, okay. What things Mr. Jackson said you during your interview with him?
That is what I am. I asked him for giving me from start to finish what occurred in this incident, and that is what he told me.
If it was now, and at this, I'm sorry, I'm going to restart my question. You had made a statement earlier about Mr. Malingoni defending himself, and you verified that logically, if someone's coming at you, you would logically have the right to defend yourself.
Not necessarily if they're coming at you, but once they put their hands on you, it is okay to defend yourself, of course, especially in the home.
Well, isn't the law in the state of Indiana that if you have not only actual physical contact, but the reasonable fear of harm is the standard under self-defense, right? Okay. And Detective, I'm going to ask you, because of your experience in dealing with these types of cases, had that information, whether it be denied to you or not clearly indicated to you, depending on who was making the first aggressive move, you have no idea other than the statements who was actually the first aggressor, correct?
At which point?
You can, the very first point of red contact, without having noticed it, you can rely only on your refreshed recollection from your report as to who the first aggressor may have been. Is that fair?
Based on the statements given by both parties.
Right. When you spoke to Mr. Malingoni, it was later when you returned to the police station.
Immediately after transporting Mr. Jackson, I was spoken to Mr. Malingoni.
Now, Mr. Johnson's daughter was a woman by the name of Sylvia Smith, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Did you speak with Sylvia Smith?
Not indicated in the report, no.
Were you aware whether or not Sylvia Smith was in the residence at the time the altercation happened?
That was not made clear to me by either one.
Okay. By Mr. Jackson or Mr. Malingoni? Okay, and again, because you didn't speak with Sylvia Smith yourself.
Again, not that I know in my report.
Do you have an independent recollection that whether you knew Ms. Smith was in the premises or on the premises at the time you questioned Mr. Jackson? You not have a call. Your report, if you can refer to the first page, just actually, again, feel free to look at it. I'm going to be looking down about the center of the page. There's a line item number 36 where it says describe injuries. You see that?
Yes.
And we have cut/forehead, swelling/discoloration on that. Yes, okay. Those were the injuries that you had observed.
Those are the most serious.
What other injuries did you observe?
This is in page 2 of the report. That would be a more descriptive version. The only reason why it's slightly more descriptive there is because in the first page, you can only put so much in that box before the font becomes so small that it's unreadable.
Right, well, these were all basically not that you had in that is where you saw the injuries, if I'm not mistaken, reviewing your, from what was raised. There were no other complaints. I'm sorry, Mr. Malmagoni would have told you that there were other parts of his body that were injured. You would have noted them in the report. Yes. Okay. Detective, other than yourself, are you aware of anyone else who, whether or not anyone else from the department in the course of the investigation spoke with Sylvia's other than yourself?
If they did, I wouldn't have recollection of it. No.
Is there a record that would indicate that you have reviewed in preparation for the deposition today whether or not anybody ever spoke with Sylvia's?
To that, if I may add one thing.
Well, I'm going to ask a few more questions on it, if you're going to be able to explain here. Detective, based upon the summary that you took in speaking with Mr. Jackson and Mr. Malmagoni, I can imagine that through the course of your career you get statements from people on applications that aren't always the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Correct? That's a fair statement. And the best you can do the best you can do is after speaking with these individuals and based on your observations of what pieces of evidence, physical evidence may be, that you do your best to put together, reconstruct what happened, correct? Yes. Obviously, but not being an eyewitness, there's never an absolute certainty, is there? On your end.
The only thing that I can say is when both parties agree on certain elements of the case,
since you spoke to Mr. Malmagoni at later that evening at the police station, have you had an occasion to speak with him since? Not that I recall. You responded to this incident at approximately 5:07 p.m. Were you able to reconstruct based on your conversations with Mr. Jackson and Mr. Malmagoni how far in the past before you got the call that the fight between them occurred?
based on the statements I received, it was very recent that day.
Within, that's what I was going to say, was it, did they indicate whether it was early morning, afternoon, within an hour, or
Mr.
one
Malmagoni related that he ran from the scene to the police department, and I can say that their residence is located less than 1 mile from the police department.
Okay. Detective, other than, I know that someone at the Norwell Police Department took photographs of Mr. Malmagoni as indicated in the report. Did you or any other officer, to your recollection or knowledge, take photographs of the interior of the home where the assault supposedly occurred?
To that end, I don't believe Mr. Jackson had the authority to allow us to go, and I was not aware of Ms. Smith's location. I don't believe Mr. Malmagoni even had keys on him to enter the home. So forcing entry into a home, unfortunately, when everyone is relatively, everyone's going to live, and the incident has been reported, is nice at best, especially in obtaining evidence when there is not a suspect that we need to remove.
Okay, so and when you kind of anticipated my next question, even after you had spoken with Mr. Manley, you obviously, at some point we can introduce you to someone. At this point, based upon what you have observed, and based upon your conversations with Mr. Manley and his representations, and Mr. Jackson, there was no need in your mind to go in and photograph, document the interior at all. Based on the information provided by both. Again, at this point we are trying to prove who is the aggressor and what occurred. The agreement points were that Mr. Jackson was the aggressor. That's based on statements given by both parties. And the injuries that were occurred were reported by photographs and indicated in my report. Detective, you had known later that Mr. Manley was not truthful in his representation about how the fight began or how the confrontation first began. Would that have affected your conclusion about who was, about your conclusions mentioned in your report? I'm going to object as soon as that's not in evidence.
We need
What I can say is that
We will draw the objection.
Okay. Are we going back?
and they both agree, not just the victim, but also the alleged suspect, as to how the incident began. It's difficult for me to surmise that even if one person changed their story, why the alleged suspect would say that.
Well, I understand that, but what I'm suggesting to you is if Mr. Manley was not being truthful, would have been, just over a few summary sentences of what Mr. Jackson told you, correct?
Yeah, the complete statement Mr. Jackson gave, I wouldn't be sure.
Okay.
If you indicate what occurred, I'm going to go there.
Now, you, as a police officer, you routinely take statements of witnesses and parties to, I guess, investigations, correct? At the station? Pardon me? Oftentimes they can go to the police station.
Depending on the situation, this particular instance is the CNN station.
In some instances, those statements can be released in writing, where the person making the statement can review it in the initial pages and sign off on it before asking a statement.
The way you're talking about a written statement.
That's what I'm asking. These are available. I mean, these are tools that could be used, correct?
Not necessarily all the time.
No, I'm not saying
Not the situation it would be, because in this situation, unfortunately, the person who's injured, that I believe is identified in reference, required medical care and treatment. In that situation, I'm not going to ask anyone to do a written statement.
I understand. I guess what I'm suggesting is Mr. Jackson did not have the opportunity to review and verify what is in your supplemental report. This is your certainty.
Well, he can obtain a copy of the report.
He can obtain a copy of the report.
He can follow up with me. I'm sorry, not to know. He can follow up with me at any time and say, that is what I said. This is sort of what happened, and I can add it at a later time. If I may, I can add at a later time a supplement to the original case saying, as a matter of fact, these facts are related to by Mr. Jackson, such and such.
What I'm suggesting, my question is, Detective, is that when you wrote this report, later that night, Mr. Jackson wasn't there, correct? Okay. So this is prepared without your supplemental report is prepared without the benefit of his approval review, correct?
I don't know if I would agree with that.
No, so did you want to without giving yourself a little more board over to him and say, Mr. Jackson, I just want to make sure I got this right. Was this what did to you, or did you just prepare this report?
Well, to that end, I would also say Mr. Jackson come to the police department and ask for a copy of the report. And
Did you do that?
No, because I didn't get it as far as what happened.
I understand. Okay. My point is, nobody was giving you any other input other than your initial conversation with Mr. Manley and your initial conversation with Mr. Jackson.
That was the only information that we obtained at the time of the report.
Gotcha.
That's all I have. Jackson admit to you that he initiated assault? Yes. Did he admit to you that he choked Bethany Alabama? Yes. Did he admit to you that he pushed Mr. Alabama? Yes. Did Mr. Jackson ever tell you that he was put in fear of his life and had to go a serious injury and had to defend himself? No, not at all, Mr. Do you know Mr. Jackson? No, I've never met him. Do you know Mr. Alabama? Again, same response. Did anyone, when you were at the residence, did any woman come out and identify herself as Sylvia Smith, stating that she with you? Again, not that he didn't relate on her order there, but if she answered that hand, I would also say in this situation, because she also has, she has a tie to both parties. How can one work credence to one thing or another that she is saying she's not an independent witness? At that point, I'm speaking with two independent witnesses that have no bearing on each other's statements, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Malangoni. At that point, that's the only thing I can take as honest and truthful and credible. It's almost like a car crash. If there's a car crash and there's 4 people involved that are in one car, and there's one in another, well, I'm going to credence to the other 3 people that are in the other car involved. Well, they're going to say the same thing that the driver vehicle says. I would put it right.
Okay. Is that it on this witness? Did you have any? Okay. Yeah.
I was going to call Mr. Jackson next, meaning that he's going to want to go into some stuff.
So have lunch and
That's what I was going to say.
then do that. Okay.
We're moving at a good clip.
Yeah, we're going.
In fact, when you forgot the instruction, I wasn't even going to say anything. I figured
let it go. Okay. Gentlemen, members of the jury will break for lunch now. We'll reconvene at 1:45. So we'll break an hour for lunch. Lunch is provided to you in the cafeteria. The base will escort you down there. Once again, remember my admonishments. You're not to discuss the case with anyone other than yourselves, and only when you're all present in the jury room. Okay? All right, we'll break.
All rise.